different examples of such type of attack are given here. Is, for example, distributed attack and types of point-to-point attack. So that's why we say that we suppose they are the different types of attacks. So that explains like that. And then we have uh, then we have a type of attack that is called as a SYN flooding attack, TCP SYN flooding attack, how that particular attack is applied and how we can detect that particular attack. So there are the different methods which can be used. So this type of attack is also the example of distributed type of attack, where we apply different attacks which are called as a distributed type of attacks. So here, for example, we say the uh, uh, different the attacker tries to send the different attacks or launch different attacks by means of or through the distributed attack to distributed system. So that is why we say that it is a type of distributed attack. So here there are about more than 90% of the attacks are uh, TCP SYN flooding attacks, where actually the attacker tries to spoof the source address, for example, and then he sends or he launches different attacks to other systems. So this type of attack can be further explained. Uh, Here, for example, uh, there's a uh, there's a there's a TCP attack, which can be, for example, as you know that TCP is a connection-oriented protocol, for example. So it sends us a request to other system, and then that particular system acknowledges that service or that acknowledge that request and sends acknowledgement to the system. So how that particular attack is flooded, for example, how that particular attack is distributed to other systems. If there's a system, if there's a system here, and it sends a particular request to other system. So that particular system is actually the system which can receive the request from the user, and then the user or the receiver acknowledges that particular service, or that user acknowledges particular service, or you can say request which is sent it by the receiver, for example. So it's like that. uh, it's like that the requests are coming from different systems. Like, for example, uh, this figure further explains here. There's a user here which sends a packet, and there's a user here which receives the packet, for example. So when particular sender sends the packet and particular user receives the packet, so there's a system which sends the packet, sends the data, and there's a receiver which receives the data or receives the packet. So there's a system is used, single system is used which sends the packet, and there's a single system is used which receives the packet. Or, for example, there's a one sender and one receiver, for example. So that is an example of the point-to-point attack, where the single system sends the data and other system receives the data. And here, when such type of attack, TCP flooding attack is used, so that is called as a point-to-point TCP flooding attack. Where, for example, if there's a sender, uh, it sends a request to the receiver, for example. It sends so many requests to the receiver, so that is unable to by the receiver to handle those services or to handle those requests at a time, for example. So then, so that is example of TCP point-to-point flooding attack, where it sends particular requests to different users, and these different users are actually uh, uh, there's a single user used here, which accesses which receives uh, different requests from a system or from a user, and at a time it handles so many requests. So if he is unable to handle so many requests at a time, so then such type of attack is actually called a TCP point-to-point TCP flooding attack. So this further explain about the structure of the TCP packet which is used. Is you know that here there's a source port number, destination port number, a sequence number or acknowledgement number for the TCP packet. Or for example, that is a there are the different other header information, checksum information is used, and then there's actual data which is sent it by the sender. So we will use these different parameters here uh, in such type of attacks. For example, there are the different fields are used here, like sync field or fin, fin field or waste field. So we will explain them, our acknowledgement field. So we will explain them further when we discuss about such type of attacks. Like for example, here if uh, there's a connection, if any request is sent it to other system, for example, it is managed or maintained by three different steps here. For example, there's a host or there's a client which sends a TCP request to other system. That could be a server, for example, and then it receives that particular request which is sent it by the receiver, and then after receiving that particular request, that receiver acknowledges that request to the user. So in this way, there's a user or there's a client which sends a synchronization request to other system, and there's a other system which could be a server, for example, and it receives that acknowledgement request, and after receiving that acknowledgement request, then it sends the acknowledgement to the receiver. So in this way, these different steps are used to make a connection between a sender and the receiver. And then how this is actually, this figure further explain that how the client sends a synchronization request to other system, and how the receiver or how the server is receiving particular request from a client, for example. For example, here there's a client or there's a user, and there's another user or another system which is a server here. So it sends like synchronization request to the server, for example, and then after receiving that acknowledgement, the server is going to acknowledge that uh, request which is sent it from the client, and then it sends the acknowledgement uh, a reply to the client or to the server, for example. And after receiving that acknowledgement, the client then then sends the acknowledgement to the server, that I, for example, I have received that acknowledgement. Then after doing these things, the connection is established between sender and the user. Such type of steps which are actually uh, comes called as a TCP handshake, for example. So if so that is used to make a connection between the client and the server. So whenever a client want to make a connection between a server, so it sends an acknowledgement to the server, and server receives that acknowledgement, and then after that it sends acknowledgement to the client, and then the client confirms that acknowledgement through another request. So then after sending these, or after exchanging such type of messages between the client and the server, so the connection is established. So that is actually called as a TCP handshake, or we can say the connection is established between the sender and the receiver. And then we have example of these SYN flooding attack. as as we discussed that, for example, there's a client here, and they're the server here. So in this figure, as you can see that there are so many requests which are sent by the client to the server, and when it receives these such type of requests from the client, and then the server here is, for example, is has the limitation of uh, uh, of handling particular services, or of handling particular requests which are sent by the server or by the client. And when he's unable to respond so many services, or it has the limitation that he can respond to that much services which are given by the particulars, which are used by the particular client, then such type of attack is actually called a SYN flooding attack. So it further explained. This is further explained by this figure, as well as, for example, it seems fin request, which is used to establish a connection between the client and the server, for example, which is sent by the client to the server, and then the server sends acknowledgement to the client, and after that it sends acknowledgement. Then there's another fin replies given to the client. That means here the connection is established between the client and the server, and after receiving the fin reply by the client, it sends acknowledgement to the server. Then after using that, so it is actually making a connection between a client and server. So there's a possibility that, for example, there is acknowledgement in send it by the receiver, for example. There's a possibility that in the network it may delay that particular acknowledgement, or for example it may delay that particular request. So there's a time limit for that. For example, if it exceeds that time limit, for example, then another request is sent it by the client or by the server, or the acknowledgement request is sent when it receives that particular request. So it can resend that particular request to the server. For example, here it the acknowledgement is delayed, for example. So then it can send a particular request to the other system, or for a connection, for example. It can resend that, and then after that it can also acknowledge that particular request which is received by the receiver. So in this way, different connections are managed between the client and the server. So we have such type of attacks which are actually called as flooding attacks, where they can be launched in a network on different systems. Like, for example, the other different systems in a network are used, where they are different systems, different devices are network devices like routers and switches. So they can launch such type of attacks, or gateways, for example. So they can launch such type of attack on these different types of systems. uh, so in this way, we have different types of attacks like a flooding attack where the attacker tries to deny to make so many connections to other system, or to make so many connections to other network, so that a particular service or particular you can say uh, access of the system is denied to that particular user. So that's why we say that it is a type of denial of service attack. And then we have different types of behaviors in this method, like as we discussed that there's a possibility that there's a connection is established between a user and there's a receiver. And when, for example, if particular connection which is actually received by the user or by the receiver at particular time, which a particular limit of the time, then it is actually, then it acknowledges that request. If, for example, that particular request which is the receiver uh, is not receiving that request at particular time, for example, then it can resend that particular request to the client or to the user, so that he can send or resend that particular data or particular request to other system again if it is not received by the user. So there could be different types of attacks here as well. Like, for example, there's a uh, passive type of attack, passive type of connection, or there's a active type of connection. For example, if there's a passive type of connection, for example, when it is received by the receiver, then it is actually, for example, uh, it can close particular port which is accessed by the receiver, for example. And then if there's an active type of connection, there's a possibility that we here it can sustain a particular connection, or it can abort that particular connection for some period of time, and then it can restart that connection. So that is actually, that's why we say that it's a type of active connection. So where there's a connection is initiated by a sender, and that is received by the receiver, and after that he can send the data, he can send another request to the data that is sent by the sender, and that is received by the receiver. So in this way we have different behaviors of such type of connections. We have different synchronization requests, we have different type of pin requests. Either that could be a passive request, either that could be a passive connection, or that could be active connection. So passive connection here, that is actually where, for example, when connection is sent by the sender and received by the receiver, where the particular port is closed for particular that request. And in the type of active connection, where the clients sends a TCP connection to other system, and then the particular port is open, for example, to send the further requests which are received by the receiver, and sends acknowledgement to the receiver. So in this way we have sync request, syn raised passive connection, and we have also syn request active connection. And further we further explain such type of request or such type of attacks through this figure as well. For example, there's a client here and there's a server here. So it sends a synchronization request to the server, for example. So when it receives that synchronization request, so it is uh, so when it sends when the client sends a synchronization request by the that is sent it to the server, for example, and then it receives that particular synchronization request, and then it sends acknowledgement to the server, for example, here. So after sending the acknowledgement that is sent it by the by the server, for example, and then it establish a connection between the client and the server. So that is making a connection between a sender and the receiver. So there's another type of request also sent it, that is, for example, fin request, which is sent it by the sender or the client here, and which is received by the receiver. And then after receiving that request, so it sends acknowledgement to the server, to the client. So after receiving that acknowledgement, it sends uh, it sends a, if, for example, if it is received at particular time which is defined in the system, so it receives that. Otherwise, it can also resend that request to other system, so that he can send the particular acknowledgement for that particular request. So in this way, we have a different types of synchronization and fin request. So, so if we talk about the different behaviors of these requests, so there could be different behavior. We define them in the way that, for example, so for example, we define these different behaviors in the way that, for example, there's a client and there's a server. There's a possibility of different types of takes, different types of case here. As we discussed, there could be a passive type of connection, and there could be active type of connection. So where if there's a passive type of connection, the port number which is after receiving particular request, that is closed, for example. So if there's an active type of connection, the port number remains open between the client and the server. Then it can send further requests or further acknowledgements to the client and to the server. So in this way, these different behaviors are defined when we say that they are the different type of flooding attacks, different type of requests which are sent by the client to the server. And then we have, uh, as we discuss different behaviors of such type of attacks. For example, how many number of packets are sent by each type of request. If there's a synchronization request, so that many packets are sent by the client uh, to the server, or server to the client. So if there's a fin request, so that many packets are sent by the clients and server. So if there's a another type of connection, that is, for example, REST connection, for example, so that many packets are sent by the client and the server. So in this way, this figure further explain that how many are the passive connections and how many are active connections. So there are about more than 75% connections are active connections, which are between the client and the server. Where, for example, we have a port number that is open between the client and server, where the client sends a request to the server, and then that request is received by the receiver at particular port, for example, or particular process or program, for example, and then it receives that, and then it sends acknowledgement to other system. So that is actually type of connection, or that is a connection is actually called the active type of connection, where we have a port that is open between client and the server. And then there's other type of connection that is also called as a passive connection, where the port is uh, closed when there's a connection is established between a server and the receiver. So we have active connections, we have passive connections. So mostly they are the 75% of connections are active connections, where the port number is open and the client sends a request to the server, and server receives that request, and then it acknowledges that request. And then we have so there's a possibility of that these different connections which are sent by the sender to the receiver. So there's a possibility that they could be they can enhance the vulnerability of the system. So in this way, a particular request which is sent by the receiver, and the receiver detects that particular request, and it monitors that particular request. Either that particular request is actually an attack, or it's a normal connection. So we have to analyze that. So how we can analyze that? For example, if there's a limit of that particular connections, and if that connection is exceeding that limit, for example, so that would be considered as an attack. So, or for example, if there's a time limit of that, so at that particular time, the connection should be established, or the receiver should receive that particular connection location, and then it acknowledges that particular connection location. So if it exceeds that time limit, for example, then it can also be considered that it is a type of attack, which is actually flooding attack here. So it depends on the behavior. As we have also discussed, there are the different types of attacks. Like for example, there are the signature-based attacks. There are the anomaly-based attacks. Signature-based attacks that depends on the particular pattern of particular data or particular attack which is sent by the sender. And anomaly-based attacks are such type of attacks where we look at the behavior of particular attack, that if it is actually, if that particular attack is supposed to behave like that, so if it deviates, or if it changes that its behavior, that means it should be considered as an attack. So in this way we can analyze some such type of attacks, and then we can uh, also look at the behavior of the attack. So if it changes that particular behavior, that means it should be considered that that is an attack. And then we have uh, as we are discussing about different behaviors of different attacks, for example, so that can be monitored uh, in the systems, like when it is sent by the sender, and when it is received by the receiver, for example. So it could be monitored, either that could be passively monitored, either that could be actively monitored. So for example, if the data is coming that is going from particular system, so that is sniffed, or that is monitored by the particular system, particular system which is installed to monitor the different attacks into the system which are coming, and different traffic which is coming and going out of the system, so that we can detect particular attacks which is launched by the attacker into the system. So in this way, it is very important to monitor different behaviors of such type of attacks. So we can monitor them through by different logs, or which are generated by these systems, or we can also monitor them whenever they create these connections, and then we can monitor them, and uh, after, so that we can detect that either that particular connection which is established between the sender and the receiver, either that particular connection is a normal connection, or is an attack, which is an attack launched by the attacker. So if we are analyzing such type of attack, so there's a possibility that uh, there are connections which are established between the sender or between the receiver, and we detect that that particular connection maybe an attack between the client and the server, or for example, a user launches may launch an attack to other system. So there's a we say that it is a type of it is a type of attack, but there's a possibility that it is not an attack. So it could be a normal connection between a client and the server. So when uh, we are having particular intrusion detection system. So every intrusion detection system which detects an intrusion or which detects an attack that is launched by an attacker. So there's a possibility that it may detect a particular attack, but it is not actual attack. So that is called the false positive. So for example, or for example, uh, if an attack is there and it is not detected by the intrusion detection system, so it could be it is called a true positive. So these are the different parameters which are we say that which are considered when we have particular intrusion detection system. So different requests are sent it by the client and the server, and these different requests could be an attack or could not be attack. So that depends on the on the type of intrusion detection system, that how he detects that particular intrusion. Either that particular intrusion or attack is an actual attack which is detected by the system. If it is an actual attack, then is detected by the system. That is actually, for example, uh, is a feature given to the intrusion detection system. Or for example, if there's not an attack but that is detected by the system, so then it is called the false positive. So it is actually whenever we design particular intrusion detection systems, so uh, we design so that it can produce less number of false positives, and we can have we can have attacks which are detected, which are actually true attacks, or which are actual attacks which are detected by the system. So in this way, we have different types of attacks as we discussed so far, like SIMRF attack, like flooding attack. So they are point-to-point attacks, and they are the distributed type of attacks. Point-to-point attacks are such type of attacks which are attacks between there's a single system and there's another single system, which the attacker launches an attack to other system. Or for example, there's a user, for example, or there's an attacker, for example, or there's a victim, for example, or we say that that is a target, for example, which is we say that that is launched by the attacker. Or for example, we have other type of attacks as we discussed, which are called the distributed type of attack, where there's a distributed network is involved. Whenever any attacker tries to attack to a network, to a system which consists of different different systems in the network, when it tries to launch an attack to that system, so then it forms an attack. So we have also discussed structure of such type of attack, that how the attack is launched by the attacker uh, by using different systems in between them. For example, it can install different services on other systems, and these other systems are called the agents, for example. And when it install different services on different other systems, and then they launch the take to a particular system, a particular target, a particular victim of the victim which is in the system. So we say that that particular type of attack, where we have there's a possibility that there's a attacker which could be a legitimate user, or there's an attacker which can be not legitimate user. So it depends on that either that attacker is a is the user which is given particular permissions, to access particular services. And for example, if it is given particular permissions to access particular services, and if it is exceeding those particular services, so particular privileges which are given to them, so then it is actually called as a we say that it is a type of attack which is actually we say that that is done between a sender and the receiver. And then we have discussed about uh, a distributed type of attack, where we have a flooding type of attack, where an attacker tries to attack to other systems, and these different attacks which are launched by an attacker to other system by sending for example, there's a client and there's a server here, and it sends many requests which is sent by the client to the server. And if it is unable to respond particular request which is sent by the client, so then it is considered that is a type of attack which is called as a flooding type of attack. So we have discussed such type of attacks, and we have also discussed that what could be the behaviors of such type of attacks. Either there could be a passive type of attacks, either that could be active type of attacks. In the passive type of attacks, as we discussed, that if a client want to access particular service to a server, or particular service which contains particular port number, for example, so it is closed for that. So then it is actually called a passive type of attack. When particular service is actually open, then it is called the active type of attack. Then that particular request is sent it by the sender and the receiver. And then we have further discussed about that which type of attacks are actually active attacks, and which type of attacks are the passive attack. And then how much percentage of the activities are launched by the attacker, and how much percentage of the active passive attacks are launched by the server. So in this way, we have different types of attacks, and it could be possible that uh, the false number of intrusion detection system may produce uh, more number of false positives. So we have to design a particular system so that it can produce less number of false positives. So in this way, we discuss different intrusion detection methods. So how these different intrusion detection methods used by a system to detect particular intrusions, and how these different how the different attacks are launched by the network by the attacker on a single system, or on a distributed system by an attacker to attack the system. Okay, so have you any question? Have you any question?
Sir, what is difference between